The UAR COVID-19 Addendum. Obviously, this addendum was created in response to the ongoing pandemic. Certainly, we hope that this form will go out relatively quickly. But in the interim, it certainly addresses any possible delays related to COVID-19. It does not have to be used. It is simply a resource for realtors to use to help their buyers and their sellers understand certain delays that could be related to COVID-19. So looking at this form, Section 1 addresses, and it is very broad, it addresses many of the items with respect to COVID-19 and the possible delays, including a positive COVID-19 test or any sort of mandatory or self-imposed quarantine, anything dealing with underwriting. So it is very broad, and we recognize that that possibly could be abused. But we're working off the premise that both buyer and seller want a successful transaction. So certainly it addresses that, those possible delays. Section 2 and Section 3 deal with, and hopefully it doesn't come into play, but deals with in the event of the seller being unable to allow the buyer to access the property, again, due to something related to COVID-19. So if, for example, if the seller tests positive, obviously the buyer and their inspector or their appraiser should not go through the property. So at that point, the buyer is denied access to the property. And so what happens is we almost call it timeout, where the buyer's due diligence or the buyer's financing and appraisal is then suspended by the number of days in which the property is unavailable. And then you call untimeout. And that's what Section 2 and Section 3 are meant. Now, Section 4, this is probably the most far-reaching aspect of this addendum, is that it allows the buyer or the seller, because certainly COVID-19 could affect either one, it allows either party the right to extend the settlement deadline due to COVID-19 related delays, which again are very broad and can be interpreted in a number of ways, by up to 30 days, simply by giving written notice to the other side. So if the buyer, for whatever reason, cannot settle by the settlement deadline related to COVID-19, they can then unilaterally request a delay of that settlement deadline by up to 30 days. Now again, this does not have to be used. Buyer and seller could certainly use a flexible settlement deadline, or they could use a blank addendum as circumstances arise, but it is meant to address and help certain transactions where a buyer may not feel comfortable entering into a transaction, or a seller may not feel comfortable entering a transaction given some of the unknowns related to COVID-19. So hopefully it's at least a starting point for realtors to discuss some of these issues, whether or not this form is actually used.